Welcome to Talk to Me, Conversations on Relationship Power, hosted by Love Before All. I'm Annie Paraison. Relationships are the blueprint for everything we build, from our families to our teams to our communities. Join us for real conversations that move beyond the surface. Let's grow in love together to grow the beloved community. Welcome. So, before we get started and dive into your incredible 25 years through higher education, we ground every episode of Talk to Me with the exact same question. What or who taught you the most about relationship, and how has that shaped the leader you are today?
I think for me, it would probably be my mom that's taught me the most about relationships and thinking about the dynamic, I guess, friendship circles or people that I saw her engage with throughout my childhood. It was a very diverse and eclectic and purpose driven group. And I think that taught me a lot about kind of being out of my comfort zone, but at the same time, not having any preconceived notions or ideas about what I thought relationships could be and what I thought they could look like. I actually learned a lot even with regards to persistence in relationships from my mom as well, especially even I would say persistence sometimes when you shouldn't. But it also taught me a lot about having some grit and sticking through things. So definitely for sure my mom has been probably my biggest influence, and the ways it's shown up in my own leadership style and how I conduct myself. I've always been a very open person about relationships and about those who I choose to engage with. I One of my biggest sayings is I don't like for people to box me in or make assumptions about me. And the same kind of can go for my relationships and friendships. Just as an example, some of my closest friends, like if you saw us together, you'd be like, how do y'all even know each other? Right? Like you would just because by physical appearance, we wouldn't look like we were supposed to have anything in common. And I gave a talk last week, and I just shared this story about one of my closest friends being a person who, I'm glad I just spoke this out loud. I think her birthday was yesterday. One of my closest friends being a person who is 71, which is about 21 years older than me, is white, is a female, has had all gray hair for the last 40 years, but is a person who was one of my faculty members that I took a class with in undergrad. And because of life circumstances for her, she had kids later in life through a surrogate. And so she actually has a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. And about 5 years ago, she was going in for a major cancer surgery. And she wanted me to make sure I knew where some key things were in case the surgery didn't go well, because I'm the executor of her estate. And I remember when we went to the bank and she was showing me where, like, safe deposit box. So she had to meet with the bank manager, and the bank manager's like, blink twice if you're in trouble, kind of thing. Because you got this large black man and this old white lady with all gray hair. But he doesn't know we've been the best of friends for the last 30 some years. But that's like, to me, like the pinnacle of relationships and not being boxed in, and what I actually call not settling for the low hanging fruit. The low hanging fruit is the things that, like, on paper you would say, I work out, you work out, let's be friends. The reaches are the ones that I really value. That's probably a very long answer to you.
We tend to gravitate towards the people who don't always make us feel uncomfortable. And I think sometimes some of the most rewarding and maybe growth inspiring relationships
Yeah.
are the ones where the discomfort is there, and then we learn to just sit with it and explore what it's trying to teach.
And on both ends. And that's the beauty of it. It's one
Mm-hmm.
thing if one
Mm-hmm.
person is sitting in discomfort, then that's not good. But when you're both sitting there and you both realize, like, there's a certain level of curiosity, there's a certain level of I don't know, and you're willing to kind of be that for each other, that kind of one source of truth for each other, that makes a big difference, which I've always shared with even my mentees. I was a residential faculty member for 7 years on campus. And I would always tell students, Black students in particular, like sometimes it would go both ways, but I would vividly remember having this conversation with some of my Black students about, like, as much as it may sound crazy, like if a student asks you something about like Black culture or about your hair. Like if I ask you something about your hair, like you have to assume that this person has never interacted with a black person in their life. Make that assumption. And also make the assumption that they're not coming from a place of ignorance, they're coming from a place of curiosity, right? In that place of curiosity, the fact that if they thought enough to ask you about it, there's some level of comfort and safety and security that they perceive in you and why they chose to ask you instead of someone else. And so take it as an opportunity to teach. Like I know sometimes we say I get tired of teaching, I get tired of teaching. But at the same time, like that's the only way we really grow and learn sometimes. Like somebody has to be willing to kind of be that voice and that teacher. And I knew that, as a black African American faculty head of house, there was a huge, and some of them told me this, there was a huge chunk of the students in that building, they had never interacted with a black person in their life. But guess what? Their faculty head of house is now a black man. They got to figure it out. And so for me, I could have been like, well, go learn from somebody else. I ain't going to tell you about these things. It's like, no, I'm going to give you this moment to teach. You're going to learn today. Got to have Kevin Hart to say. Okay. Uh,
That approach really brings me back to, I think when I think about how I'm in a relationship with folks, my family automatically comes to mind as well. But I also like branch out and think about two particular women specifically who happen to be educators. To your point about when your student come to you, you lean on curiosity and support. And when I think about those two women, my English teacher, and I think at some point when teachers in high school, for me, know that you're high achieving, they just don't push you. And my English teacher was the only teacher who said, "Oh, you're going to rewrite this personal statement for college as many times as I need you to." And I took 3 tries with her to do it. And then my guidance counselor, when I applied for the Posse scholarship, I was like, I don't know what a Vanderbilt is. I'm not going to that. And she pulled me out of fifth period. And I remember this like it was yesterday. Pulled me out of fifth period. She said, "You're going to do this application for the Posse Foundation. You're going to sit right here and you're going to do it." And I think of like those types of relationship, people who really have nothing to benefit
mhm.
from you being well, but they still take time. And now, like hindsight is 2020, and I look back at my life, I'm like, Miss Joubert making me do that application and me getting that Posse scholarship to come to Vanderbilt changed the trajectory of my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
So now as I look back, think about it, it's yes, it's my family. And then I also think of these people who changed my life in a way that I didn't get to thank them when I was connected to them.
Yeah.
And I don't know where to find them now to say thank you
Yeah.
because that relationship changed my life
Yeah.
completely.
You just gave me chills because your English teacher was my geometry teacher. And
Oh,
and, and I shared this same story last week as well. Eighth grade, I had just come off of a 10-day suspension for cutting up and cussing out a PE teacher because I'm very competitive. They let me back in school early because I was an athlete and they needed me to run the ankle leg at a 4x1 and 4x2 relay. I get back in school early. My geometry teacher is the assistant track coach. I'm in the back of class cutting up still. I'm a class clown. Mr. Holman stops his lecture, comes to the back of the road where I was sitting at, grabs me by the collar, and drags me out that school. He takes me out to the back of the school and calls me everything but a child of God and tells me, "You are effing up. You have so much potential. You got so much talent. God has given you so many gifts. And if you don't change your ways, this is where you're going to end up at." And he started naming some names of people that were in my class that had already either died violently or who fast forward ended up going to prison. And that man in that moment, like, and I'm crying. I'm out there in the back of the school crying, and there's nobody around. It's just me and him in the back of this school, right? And about 5 years ago, I wrote him a letter, and I thanked him for that conversation. And I told him he doesn't know it, but when I walked back in that school, I walked out of that school like he took a kid out of that school who was probably may not have gone to college. I'm not even gonna lie, probably wouldn't have gone to college. But the kid who came back in that school was a class president for the next 4 years, graduated with a 3.97 GPA, and was very focused and serious, right? And so for me, that's a relationship. And so a lot of people even ask me sometimes, that's how he was an alpha. That's why I became an alpha because I wanted to kind of pay
Mm,
homage to that kind of relationship and that kind of man. And so yeah, those kinds of your English teacher with my geometry teacher, and it's the same thing. Like, and sometimes it those to me are some of those special relationships when people see things in you that you don't see in yourself, right? And you eventually come to see it. And I think a lot of times we're not we're not fortunate enough to have the opportunity to go back and to thank them. I've been I guess as I you get older, I've gotten to that point where I'm like I got to go back and thank. I want to thank as many people as possible because I know I did not get here on my own.
yeah, absolutely. In thinking about and everything we're talking about, maybe seen as like soft skills, right? How we relate to other people. And in my consulting work, I see a lot of organizations that prioritize, results over the skills of relating to one another
Hmm.
in this way. How, and in being in, starting in government and now being in higher ed, I'm sure I
Hmm.
can only imagine what that bureaucracy looks like in your world. Can you share a time when you prioritized human relationship, building real safety with the team or your students, and cutting through all red tape, and it actually developed into like trust for you and your team?
Yeah. I want to go back to one of my earlier tough challenges as a leader. When I started Tennessee Higher Education Commission, I was brought in as a director on a team of four, and at some point in time, I had to make because of budget cuts. This is going into like 2008. We know all the financial stuff that was happening then, and thinking about one, the work that we had to get done, but two, tough decisions that we had to make. And I had hired some new people to replace some folks who, when I came on board, jumped ship, right? But there was one individual who stayed and weathered the storm, and and so I brought all these new people on, and then there's one old incumbent that was still there, and then we go through this budget cycle of cuts, and I knew that I was going to have to let this person go because of, again, primarily budget reasons. But the way in which I handled that was different than how it was, how they wanted me to handle it. And I did it in a way I drug it out longer. I met with the person, I centered his humanity in that decision and centered all that he was going through in that decision. And I love it now when I look back how I handled it, in part because I remember when we went to Memphis for my wife's fellowship, and when we moved back like about 2 or 3 weeks before my daughter's like big birthday, like her seventh birthday or something like that. And she wanted to have a party. Like I was like, we've been gone for 4 years. I don't know anybody here with kids her age. Him and his daughter came to the party. Him and I have been friends. We at one point in time we were workout partners before we left. And so I think about like somebody that you fired, right? You fired this person, but then you worked out with it. Like fast forward 2 or 3 years after you fired them, they become a workout partner. You worked out with them a couple of days a week. Your kids kind of know each other. So I think how you handle that, how I handle that, I I centered the relationship over the like bureaucratic process of saying no, we have to do it by this date versus let's shift some things around in the budget. Let's give him a little longer runway to give him time to potentially land on his feet at another location so that that gap between his last check and his next check is not as great as they wanted it to be. But if we can pull some things from other spaces, then that buys me a longer runway, and it also gives me enough time to kind of softly land this plane instead of an abrupt crash. And I think that the success of that was proven by the fact that we maintained it. To this day, we're still friends, right? And for me, like very few people can fire me, and I'm still gonna be friends with them. So
It's funny. As I'm listening to you, one of the things that I elevate with Love Before All is love as a strategy. And what you just shared was pretty much how do we operationalize love
mhm.
in our interactions, and that exactly what that looks like.
Yes, back.
So because love is a strategy, and I don't always see it as just warm fuzzy. Just in February, the intention for me was to make love a discipline and not just a mood, right?
Hmm.
So with that, I like to say when you're agreeing with me and I like what you're saying, it's easy to love you.
Hmm.
But when it becomes a discipline, when we're now clashing,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not very fond of what's coming out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And then now it becomes a discipline because I still have to see your humanity, to your point. Understand that, yes, this may be all we're dealing with at work, but then there's a whole other spectrum. There are more layers to you that's happening. So, can you share a moment where there was a breakdown in trust or some difficult decision that you thought about that in hindsight now was like a really big lesson for you, and then it's continuing to influence the way that you relate with us? So can you share a moment where a breakdown in trust or a really difficult decision taught you a profound lesson about the weight of holding influence over others?
Yeah, I think probably the most, I guess, relevant one, the most recent one that I can think of is, I was brought to IU, and one of the reasons I was excited about coming to IU was because of the person I was going to get to work with. Very renowned and well known student affairs in higher ed, very renowned. This person was I was here for less than a year and then they were fired. And that was a decision that I didn't necessarily agree with. In fact, I still don't agree with, and I still have had like some angst about it. And the person that we ended up pivoting to in terms of my new boss could not have been more different operationally, philosophically. They were polar opposites, right? But I came here to work with and for this person, and because everything about this person matched with my style, philosophy, all the things. But this is not my new boss, right? And so that was a challenge for me in terms of a decision that I didn't have anything. I didn't necessarily have direct influence in making that decision, but I had to live with and deal with the consequences of that decision. And part of that, when it first happened, I was like, hello indeed, hello monster, like all the places because because I was like, I didn't sign up for this. I didn't sign up for this, right? And once because I had my name is in certain, search circles, there was a position that came up afterwards. After that, around that whole time, there was a position that came up at a school very much like Vanderbilt, very similar to Vanderbilt. If I'd have stayed at Vanderbilt, there was a role that I was going to move into. There was a perfect role and position if Vanessa Beasley hadn't left, but potentially if Vanessa Meade hadn't left. But there was a role that was like my dream job that I'd never really gotten, never came to fruition. That's what this was at this other place. And they were coming to me like, no, we want you. And so again, with this decision, I could have been like, great, perfect timing. I'm out. When I looked around, my wife is thriving, my kids are thriving, everybody's thriving in their respective lanes. Love and unselfishness told me you can chase and do what's going to make you happy. But right now, in this moment, your family is thriving. And at the first little sign of a challenge or an obstacle or a decision that doesn't go your way, you want to pick up and run. That's the coward's way. You stay here and you make this work. And what was crazy is, so when I decided to stay here and make this work, I actually started developing a really close friendship with this person that was polar opposites to me in so many ways, right? Even to the point of like, I know when we step into that polling booth, we both completely different. but we, but I started to really have a liking for this person, so much so that like when they first started, I was like, is this person human? Like they're a machine. But one of the last interactions we had, they gave me a hug. And I say one of the last interactions we had because to show you how God works, that person ain't here no more. The new boss that we have is very close to the one that I came here for. And so again, persistence and sticking it out. This initial decision that seemed like, oh, pick up ship and run, but you stick it out because of the love and consideration for everything that's happening in your family, and look how things work out. You end up back where you started at, but also in a better position because just in a lot of ways, everything kind of worked itself out to where we're even better now than what we were before. But in that moment, I could have been like, "Oh, time to go. Shut up, just close shop. They fired you, they didn't let you go. It's time to go." So, yeah, that's probably my closest example that I can think of.
Yeah, your story elevates something I find I coach executives sometimes, but I also work with teachers and in early childhood, so
Hmm.
6 and under. And what I find is people are find it very difficult balancing their needs and the needs of the people they love or
Hmm.
the needs of the people they
Yes.
serve. And it's difficult because most people don't realize it's a skill, like that you actively have to practice. And to practice it, you actually have to talk to people
Yeah.
and engage with
Hmm.
them and relate with them. And your story is the perfect depiction of, okay, I'm not miserable
Yeah.
and my loved ones are thriving. So let's see what the universe has to
Yeah.
have in store for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
And to your point, it always ends that, like, the universe always finds a way to let you know, yeah, okay, you're in the right place.
Hmm.
Which brings me to, for I have like this fundamental belief that love is one of the most powerful lever for permanent behavior change. And a lot of times when I work with clients, what we're trying to build is permanent behavior
Hmm.
change. And I say love is the most powerful behavior change. So that is pretty much our non-negotiable. So if you could distill your own leadership philosophy down to like one core principle, your non-negotiable value, how would you define that? What would that be?
Yeah. The one for me, I want to go back to the old adage or the cliche of like, treating people how you want to be treated. Is at its core, but there's layers to that. And one of my key layers is, oh, multiple layers, but one of them is like nothing is above or beneath me, right? And so I go back to my time as a director at the BCC when if an event's over and tables need to be cleaned, go clean tables. It's not just my student workers that need to do that. So nothing's above or beneath me as a leader. And I think when my staff see me doing that, it sends a message that like, okay, he's here helping us. He's really concerned about us. He's not just like leaving us just for us to do. So I think that one's important. So nothing's beneath me, but also everybody is worthy of my time. Every person is worthy of my time. I think yesterday, actually, not yesterday, day before yesterday, I stopped and talked to, we have a new custodian that cleans our building that I'm in right now. And I literally did not realize that I had been talking in the hallway to this person for 55 minutes and learned so much about their life. They're Latino, but just had a great, really opportunity to learn a lot about them as a person. And it made me think about how going back to even at Vanderbilt, and then in my previous relationships or places of employment or whatever, I'm gonna give the chancellor the same level of respect that I'm gonna give the groundskeeper. And so having that tentacle and that mindset and mantra, you build a whole lot of allies and you build a whole lot of folks that care deeply for you, right? I think about being at Vanderbilt, where one of the things I did, I started the Association of Vanderbilt Black Faculty and Staff, and in that group, I had tenured faculty members. I had Dr. Jeff Upperman, who's like he's very big at the med school. I had all these people, but I also had secretaries. I had cafeteria workers from Rand. I had all these different people, and I remember when I was really initially, flirting with leaving Vanderbilt, and I wasn't sure. I was like, oh, maybe I'll stay and yada yada yada. But I had a person who was a secretary who came to me and was like, because I'm a secretary, I have access to people's calendars and their emails. There's some stuff I think you need to see. And that's what made me make the decision that it was time to leave Vanderbilt. But it goes back to that same secretary, somebody that I treated with the same level of respect that I gave the chancellor. And when you treat people with a certain level of respect and decency and so forth, it comes back to you. And to this day, people don't know that's when I said F Vanderbilt, because in so many terms that were emails that said F me. And that was shared with me by somebody that you would think has no power, but what power they had, they chose to use it to kind of bless me with some information. So to me, one of my non-negotiables as a leader is I give everybody's worthy of my time, and nothing is beneath me.
Time is a precious commodity too. This ties directly into the idea of beloved community.
Mhm.
And ultimately, I think when I get up every morning, what I'm trying to achieve is skillfully regulated adults that can properly support the development of children,
Mhm.
and that can also lead to us coexisting with each other
Mhm.
in a way that supports all of us. And I think a little bit connecting back to your story, access to information
Mhm.
does that a lot.
Yep.
And you said what?
No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm amening on that, my breath.
Oh, access to information, and it's been a theme that's coming up for me a lot in meetings. It's like, wow, we take for granted our access to information. And earlier in the conversation, you mentioned, you didn't say positive intent, but having positive intent is supportive, because if I'm going to assume that I know why you're asking a question or why you're doing what you're doing, I might as well assume positive so it keeps me regulated so I can continue to engage with you. And when you look at a university campus, essentially you're looking at a micro beloved community,
Mhm.
because there are people there ultimately supposed to focus on the support of the students who then become the future leaders of tomorrow, if you want to go with the cliche.
Mhm.
So, what does it take for a leader at a school, at an organization, would you say, to move from just managing their team to actually building a culture of care? Because to your point, one of the, and I'm assuming, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, part of the reason you said bye to Vanderbilt, because there was a lack of system of care. Because if there was a system of care there, you would have
Yeah.
been there because you would have felt cared
Yeah.
for. So, what does it look like when a leader is not simply managing a department or a team, but they're actively building a culture of care for the entire system?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's an important question. Thank you for that question. Because I think one of the things that you as a leader have to be training for and preparing for, and what to me signals that you care about people more than anything, is you have to be prepared to lose them. Being prepared to lose them. What I mean by that is every last one of I just did my annual performance reviews with my team. And I asked one of my staff members, I said, what do you want to do in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 7 years? Like, tell me your plans. My job then as a leader is to make sure you're ready for that. It's to get you prepared for that. And sometimes it's because that's part of this annual review. She had to submit goals, and she had two goals, right? I said, no, I'm going to add these other two goals, because these other two goals, because you're aspiring for something that I've already been through, I know that these other two skills you got to know how to do, right? And so, in knowing how to do those, you're acquiring the skills to then be ready for the next position. And care shows up in that you're not only helping them acquire all the prerequisite skills, but I've had some employees that don't know how to take it when I send them job notifications, right? I think you'd be a great candidate for this. I'm not trying to tell you that I want to lose you, but I know that like this system, in this system and in this structure, you can't move up till I move up, right? And because this is an opportunity where, yeah, I could see you making a lateral move into another office on this campus, but if you want to go to that next step, I think you'd be a great candidate for this. And so I've had employees that Rashard Peel, who's the director of the Black Culture Center now, who's replaced me essentially. Uh, and he thought I was joking about this. Like, no, let's do some mock interviews. When he interviewed for a position at Purdue, I want you to get the position, right? I don't want to hold you back. And so I think part of a culture of care, it has to look like I'm leading my team and leading them in a way in which I'm instilling the skills and the resources, but I'm also conveying that I care. I care about you in this moment, your family in this moment, your work life balance, your quality of life in this moment, but I also care about your future dreams. And part of caring about your future dreams mean that I got to be concerned about the fact that yes, I might have to replace you, right? But in the long run, you're going to look back and be grateful and thankful for the fact that you had a boss that allowed you the leeway to kind of realize I can go apply for a job at somewhere else, don't get it, and come back and he don't hold that against me, right? It's like, okay, we didn't get that one, we're gonna get the next one, right? And but at the same time, still appreciate it. And so we went through rounds of that, and then finally ended up he stayed there and took my job. But to me, that's what care looks like. That's how you create a culture of care. You got to show people that I care about more than just what you do for me right now, right? I care about what you want to do for yourself in the future. I care about what you want to do with your family in the immediate future. Like you have to convey that. You have to kind of show a concern, and you can't have this like mentality or mindset of I'm here, I'm the leader, and I'm threatened by people that are beneath me because if they get too much shine and they may take my job. You can't operate like that. You got to be confident and comfortable in who you are and what you know and what you do and what you can bring to the table, and not let that cause you to kind of try to hold your staff down. Like that's a crabs in a bucket mentality, and I don't like that in any shape or fashion, right? So I think it's important that as a leader, you part of creating that culture of caring is yes, realizing and accepting the fact that sometimes you may lose a person because you've cared for them enough to bring them opportunities that took them off of your team, but now you just go back and replace them.
Oof. The world needs more bosses like you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think one of the things I've always struggled with supervisors is once you find out what it is that I want, because I'm vocal about that, it always for me has been or radio silence, or if
Yeah.
I felt like I did performance evaluations that just got filed away and nobody actually read them.
Hmm.
So it feels really good to hear that in a culture of care, when you do take the time to fill out a performance evaluation, you feel like the way your approach lets me know that, oh, you actually read what I've put on my paper
Hmm.
and we're actually going to do something about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So if you could directly look at leaders or change makers that are going to be listening to this conversation, what piece of advice you can offer on building meaningful relationship?
Yeah. I think for me, the piece of advice that I can offer on building meaningful relationships, one component of it is, and it goes back, it ties into something I just talked about in the last story. See the total person, care about the total person, care about the things that they bring to the table that's about the job, but also care about the things that ain't about the job. And that's how you develop more trust. That's how you develop more team. You develop staff that will run through a wall for you when they realize and feel like you care about the totality of them, right? And I've always had that in not only my leadership positions, but just my friendships. Like you bring things to them, you care about the totality of everything that's going on in the world, and you'd be amazed at what people will give back to you and what people will be willing to do for you, the way people will show up for you, the things that people will commit to doing. I can get a whole lot of more out of my staff if for me to say, hey, we really need to get this project done. I need people to work extra. I wouldn't even have to say that probably because if they know that the deadline's coming up, they're gonna take it upon themselves. Like I don't want my boss to look back going into this meeting. So if I got to stay late today to get this done, they're gonna get it done, right? When they feel like I care about them. Because when we didn't have this project going on and I knew there's something else, and I was like, dude, why are you here? Go to your kid's game, go do this. Yeah, this nothing that we're doing right now is that pressing, right? Because I gave them back that time because I cared about more than just the work. When it is time to tighten the belt and do some other stuff, they're just willing to do it. So I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned and appreciated from a leadership perspective that I think would be helpful.
We've heard care about the whole person,
Yes.
regardless of title or position. Make sure you offer all the time
Hmm.
because information comes to you in ways that you may not realize.
Yes. 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 Yeah. And what's crazy is like that still happens. Like I had another random story when we've had some shifts and transitions that have been happening recently in my job, and I was starting to get a little antsy again. It's like, oh Lord, they're gonna start moving people around. I had a secretary who not even working here no more. Another secretary was like, she called me and was like, "You good? It's gonna be some changes, but it ain't in it ain't in your unit." But it's like those kinds of stories to me. It's like again, it just reminds me I'm so thankful and grateful for the fact that I always have that mindset of like, no, you treat everybody with the same level of respect and everybody's worthy of your time.
Beautiful. This has been an incredible conversation. And to close out, I invite you to finish this sentence. Leadership is
Leadership is humility. Leadership is caring. Leadership is respectful. Leadership is not permanent.
Mm. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for sharing your brilliance with the Love Before All community. I wish you well.
Thank you, Annie. I appreciate this.
Thank you for joining us in the practice of listening today on Talk to Me. We hope this conversation gave you a new route to water in your own leadership or life. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend and visit us at lovebeforeall.com to continue building the beloved community together. Until next time, grow in love and grow with love.